Okay, we ready to rock and roll? Are we recording?
We are.
Okay. So, everybody, thank you for attending this training on how to resolve alley to address point issues. I've already got a project set up. When you will be asked to do this, you will have your regular remediation project, and you will have a table that Glenn will prepare that looks a lot like this table here, okay, at the bottom of the here. So it basically has all the information the phone company maintains in its database about every landline phone number. This county has 2728, which is a phenomenally large amount for a county with a population of 6,000 people. We determined that that is because they have a pretty active little phone company, mom and pop phone company called Sheraton Valley that provides good service and people maintain it. It is also a rural community with not the best cell coverage, and it has a lot of older people. Those are the things that, and businesses are the other things that influence how many landline phones you find in a community. When we started our work, it was about the population of the county was 20,000. You'd expect about 10,000 phones. Now you'd expect about 2,000. It really has dropped tremendously. So anyway, one of the requirements of the NextGen 911 system is that every landline phone have a locatable address that matches an address point and that matches a center line. Does that make sense? It has to have an address in the community that specifically and exactly matches the data in an address point. Okay, so you can see here are some house, some phone numbers like 403 West Benton Street. If I went to West Benton Street in the community, I moved all my stuff down here, in the community of Carrollton, I would expect there to be a house point for 403 West Benton Street. You happen to see that when I went there, that house was gone. This is like basically I've already gone through this and then we've run the test again. And after I went through all the errors, there were still 95 that failed. And that's why Glenn ran it again. And I've loaded that old data so we can kind of do some training. But our goal is to make sure that there is a point for every address. What happened with all these house gones we found, we gave them back to her, to the 911 director. She had her dispatchers call them all. Most of them were disconnected and they were still in the 911 database, and she was still paying the phone company to maintain that database for that record. So that happens sometimes. It's just sloppy bookkeeping, and it's not on the county's part. Okay, so what is an alley record? Bethany, you're pretty new to the business. Alley is automated, I believe, location information. It is the location information that is used to route a 911 call that's appended to a landline phone record. So we know that there's a 10-digit phone number. It has a specific telephone exchange. It exists in a specific postal or MSAG community, and it has a specific physical address associated with it. All of those things, that physical address will be used to match the MSAG to pull out the ESN from the MSAG, which is how it's routed. And I know that's complicated and it really doesn't matter. I mean, I can go into all this old, the old technology of, when we were when we were a world, a country that used landline phones all the time. In those days, we had a different way of doing 911 than we do now. However, the reason this is really important in next generation 911 is that the routing code is no longer with the MSAG, it's actually in the GIS data. When you look at all that remediation you've been doing and you see those NGWIDs that are associated with is that what they're called, Julie? What is it?
What are you talking about?
Oh, hi, Ryan. I'm talking about the ID that is associated with an address point. The unique ID. What's that called?
NGWID.
Just called an NGWID. Okay, but you'll see that in the beginning of your database, and that's a unique number. That is actually a routing code, and every address point has a routing code that says, matches to the PSAP. And that's why all of these alley records have to have a routing code, or else when they call 911 in a next gen system, they won't route anywhere. They'll have to
I'm
be
not sure that I follow.
oh, okay. So in
So I
the
mean, like an NGWID's just a unique number.
I
That's all
know,
that that is.
yeah, but that it's a record number that so they have so it points to that record in the database.
Yeah.
Record in the database has the routing codes in it.
Okay.
That's what it is. So it's that unique ID for that location.
All
So
right.
yeah. So our job is to make sure that all of these phone numbers have addresses that are actual physical addresses on the ground represented by a point in the database. Okay. I mean, in the GIS database. So when you get from Glenn, who bumps the alley, which is an Excel spreadsheet that we get from the phone company, just a spreadsheet, he bumps it against the 911 address point, I'm sorry, the GIS address points, and then he codes it on whether there was a match or not a match. So the first time through, this was the first time I did this stuff, if you start going to all the ones that I fixed, there's quite a few that did not match that I subsequently fixed. And some of them, like this one, I thought I fixed, but on the second round, it came back as it wasn't fixed. There was something else wrong with it. Okay. It's actually the one I have open here. It was probably a community issue. It's only checking the house number, the street name components, and the community, the MSAG community. It's not checking the ESN or other things. It's only looking at those two things to determine, is there a match or is there not a match? So because this is a table, you could relate it back to your address point. So I believe it's relatable, but I'm just, basically doing it the manual way. I mean, you can't double click on these to map them, right? First of all, they don't have a match in the data. Most of them don't. So let's just look at one that I fixed originally that didn't work the first time I got it. This is a 204 South Main Street in the community of Bogard. So I'm just going to be looking at, and there are probably going to be some in Carrollton, and this is probably not Bogard, There we go. That looks like a smaller community. Let's make sure this is Bogard. And that is Bogard. Okay, so looking at this one, the 204 South Main Street, that originally did not match before I went here and probably, let's look at the notes I left on this point when I created it or added it. It was a telecommunications building. I resolved it with the alley, okay? There was nothing there to begin with, so I actually added that point. Well, how did I know that that was a place to add the point? Well, I looked down here and we have a 200. We have nothing here. We're missing a 204. It's across from a 205. But you can also go back and look at who it is. Green Hills Telephone Corporation is a customer, right? That you could look at Google Street View if you wanted to look at the front of the building, but it's very obvious to me anyway that we were missing a point. These buildings often are not, they're just full of equipment. Look, there's really like not a, it doesn't look like it's probably got a sidewalk walking up to the front door or anything like that. So it might not have been something in the field that he would have addressed. Now, he may have dropped a landmark point when he was out in the field. So really having those landmark points on is not a bad idea. Pull mine in for this one. I'm drowning in where my landmarks go. It looks like he didn't pull one there. Okay, it just wasn't there. So I resolved that record by putting that address point on the map for 204, making sure that it was coded correctly, South Main Street in Bosworth, and then I identified that one as fixed. Okay, so that is just basically a way to just understanding that it was an error, but now there is a specific point that matches that location. So you would have to make sure on these things like main streets and these other common street names that you're in the right community. I pull the full address and the community name toward the end of the table It was at the beginning, so I can see it along with my error code. You could do the same thing by pulling the error code toward the front of the database. Does that all make sense so far?
Hey, I was just gonna
Yep.
point out too,
Yep.
there's 3 records for 204 South Main Street. So would that mean that there's 3 phone lines at that building?
Yes, exactly. So they don't have to have a one-to-one match. They can have a one address point to many records match. Okay, because some phone buildings, some locations have a lot of phone numbers associated with them. I'll show you some in here. There are a couple like USDA offices, US, Department of Agriculture offices in these rural counties, and they can have 20 phone numbers associated with them. Hospitals, things like that. Schools, if they're regular landline phones and not VoIP phones, you'll see that a lot. Okay. So yeah, so that's why, and obviously when you see this, if you keep these sorted well, like if you do like if I did a sort on an advanced sort, and I did it by the, boy, this is already sorted for me. Okay, and then by the full street name, there's got to be one for just the street name, then maybe by the street type. There might just be full street name in here. I think I did. There it is, full street. And then you hit the OK. It's going to sort them so that all these records that are together, so all those ones on Cherry Street, I thought I had fixed, but they returned again as not fixed. So let's look at those. So that's 101 Cherry Street in Norburn. Because that house number doesn't exist as it is, like as 101 Cherry Street, it's not finding it. I just go find Cherry Street by itself. And you guys can use whatever techniques you need to do that. There's these communities are pretty, there's very rural communities in this county, but they all have very similar street names. This is Hale, it's not even the right one. That's another Hale. Sometimes what I do, and it's just as easy, is you go to just keep the munis open, find Norburn. And then does Cherry Street just pop out at anybody? So I just select them all and I can find out which one it is. There it is, right there, little guy there. Okay. So here's Cherry Street. This building is, when there are lots of them, it's a Ray Carroll County grain growers, okay? It's at 101 Cherry Street. This is probably the business, but this is probably the office over here. I probably looked this one up on Google Maps to see which was which, but this is obviously the one that's more likely to be Cherry Street. Maybe I have it in the wrong spot. Maybe it should be that little building there. I can't remember what I did on this one. Anyway, so when you look at the 101 Cherry Street, why is that? Didn't that validate the last time? So I've got 101 West First Street. That's why. It really was coded as 101 First Street originally, and that I saw the 101 and thought it was okay, but that really just needed to be recoded. Does that kind of make sense to you, that it's in our database as 101 West First Street because it's on a corner? Okay. Is this making sense?
Yes.
Okay, good. Thank you. So what we want to do here is just recode it to Cherry Street, which I thought I had done before, probably. Now it's recoded as 101 Cherry Street, Scale House. This may actually be the main office, he says, for the Ray Carroll County grain growers. That's what our field data collected in the field. So obviously, he probably may have even had a 101 posted. It didn't say 101 Cherry Street, and he assumed it went to West First Street, and it really went to Cherry Street. So by doing that, I have now just fixed all of these, okay? So because I didn't do it right the first time, I would have to just, in this indication, you're just going to do your edits to say you fix things right in the field itself. So it's going to be fixed now. So the
Hey,
technique,
Susan,
yeah, go ahead.
do you ever, so I like to, occasionally on some of these like this, I like to check the USPS.gov for an address.
Okay.
Do you ever, is that a
I-
waste of time?
I
Or-
don't think it's a waste of time, especially when you have multiple options. We know that, here's the other thing, though, that I think is a good point. It brings this to mind for me, that the number that is in this database, the physical address associated with their phone number, does not populate anything else. It doesn't populate their service records. It doesn't populate their listings for the with phone companies. It doesn't populate their listings with the directory services. This could be wrong. It could absolutely, with the address they have of 101 Cherry Street, could be wrong, and maybe really should be 101 West First Street. Maybe when they set up the phones, they reported it was 101 Cherry Street. Okay, I don't know that. So it kind of depends on if you can make it match and it makes sense. I wouldn't waste time on a lot of investigation. But if you can't match it up, then I think that an additional investigation would be helpful. Does that make sense, kind of?
Yeah.
Yeah, phone companies have really strange, their database systems. You'd think they'd have the same address for everybody, but a lot of businesses don't put their physical addresses in phone because, like, if say West First Street was like a highway, like, it's Highway 119, that company would much prefer having a highway address. It's, for a big business like that, than that Cherry Street address. And they may just put, highway whatever, Norburn in the directory. So I'm giving you guys more information than you really need for this kind of thing. So I apologize. So let's go to another one that's still a no match right here. This is also in Norburn. It's 307 East First Street in Norburn. So we're already on West First. We're going to slide on down to East First. And there's the 307. What do you think's wrong with that one? Because I already know, right? Looks like it's probably going to be on Long Street instead of First Street. But the actual address in the telephone company's database is 307 East First Street in Norburn. So when we look at this, it's on South Long. So Jasper's note in the field was not sure if it's a business with no signage or just a shop. Materials on east part of parcel suggest road department or MoDOT. Says I have it as a bad address because it's really not synced up. It's an odd address. It really should be Long Street, if you can see, because of the, let's see, 101. I don't know. There's not enough stuff on the street to really tell, but you'd think that would be the like a 301 here. Okay. Well, let's look and see what kind of office
it looks like it's going south though.
No, I don't have. I hate these little. I hate the default things on my address that now I have to change them because I always have to make them black so I can see them. Yeah. So that is really a bad address for Long Street.
Mhm.
You're right. It does go south, but it wouldn't start with 307. It would probably start with 301.
But it could be, it looks like it could be the 300 block of East First Street too.
Right. That could be that 301 could be another street.
Yeah.
So if you look back, it does say that the owner, the customer, is the city of Norburn. If you look at that building and the lot next to it, it's probably their roads, their road maintenance or something. It looks like it belonged like that 307, however the city addressed it, because the cities are notoriously bad addressers, that location of 307 East First Street almost certainly, because especially thinking that we had that as 307 Long Street to begin with. That the most logical thing here is that this should be readdressed onto East First Street. Here's a place where when it is weird like that you could check either Google Street View, and I did a lot of that when I was working on this, or you could check the USPS to see if those are valid addresses. Because in this case, it makes sense that the 307 would be, would go on East First Street. It looks like a city building. but it's kind of out of order. It's not in a really good order for first, the 307th would be that first, the first address on the road. So I guess I should find some more that are more obvious. I fixed a lot of the more obvious ones. Let me see if I find one of these with no houses. I find one. House gone. Can you just find that? Of course not. Okay, I know they're here. Okay. I'll talk about those VoIP exceptions too. Oh. House gone. Here's one. Okay, so we're looking at, let's do this easier one now. Let's do the 403 West Benton Street, Carrollton. That looks like West Benton. Well, that's not right. God, I really should just stop showing you guys stuff. Obviously, 403 West Benton is there. Hold on a second.
I'm no expert, but that looks like it's there.
It is there. Okay, here's the one that was gone.
structure.
It's the 407 is gone. Yeah.
Oh,
So I got that in the wrong spot. Yeah. So his mark, it looks like it's there, but this was flown before he went out and drove it, and there was no house there. Let's try the 225 West 2nd Street. Second. Do we just find West 2nd here in Carrollton? That would be easier than trying to find
It's in
West 2nd.
Tina. West
It's in
22nd
Tina.
is in Tina.
Thank you for paying attention to what I'm not paying attention to. Tina's really small. Okay.
Oh, look at that.
Tina's really small. I remember that. So that would have been the house was 403. No. It was 225.
Probably where that 0 is.
Right here. See this? No, that's the
Oh.
even side. So it
Yeah,
goes
right here.
here. Yeah. So, there is nothing there. There's obviously not a 225. There's obviously something used to be here. Usually he'll mark those things. You can see there's something there under the trees, but it's, it wasn't marked by Jasper, who was just out in the field. So there's no structure there. So what we did on those is we just said, hey, there's no house here. Give a call, see what's going on. And most all of those were just disconnects. They just weren't there anymore. Yeah. Here's one where we had something, it said failed on the name over here. We had East Ridge street, and it's in GIS. Well, wait a minute, East Ridge Drive. It's East Ridge Drive. What is that? I don't even know what those mean anymore, guys. It's been too long since I've done this. Okay, let's look at the 500 South Main in Carrollton. One more time out.
Now that is one case where I do go the UPS quite a bit, if it's a drive or a street.
Yeah, that is perfect, because if you just go to the maps, you never even know what you'll get, on that. If you go just to Google Maps, sometimes it will have some of them street and some of them drive or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And hey, Susan.
Yeah.
I went ahead and I sent Bethany the link for United States Postal Service lookup.
Good.
But we'll probably need to go over that. So if we get a second at the end of this, if we could just
Sure.
review how to find things on there and what we're looking for.
Okay. Perfect. I'm just looking for this 500 South Main Street. Carrollton Municipal Utilities. I don't even know what was going on with that one. So, is that was Carrollton? I feel like everything is scrambled, like things are matching that shouldn't match, you know? So, okay. This one, we had a really long stretch of highway that was called Highway 65 in the GIS, but in theirs, it was called North 65 Highway. Do you see that difference? The house
Mhm.
numbers were matching up. So I referred that one back to the client who told me that it's North 65 Highway only inside the city limits, and it's Highway 65 elsewhere. I think, Ryan, on this one, didn't she eventually just tell us to change it all to Highway 65?
I think that's what we did. Yeah.
Yeah, but with her, but we had to consult. There are going to be some that you just don't know. Your GIS says one thing, their data says something else. And in this case, we looked at these, and these were city addresses on the edge of Carrollton where the highway happened to come through. So we really couldn't make progress until we went back to the customer and said, what do you really want to call this highway? What is it really called? And then those resolved. This time through, it hadn't resolved because we hadn't resolved that issue yet. So they were all showing up as errors. But when you have that kind of failure where there's a road, but the name is substantively different, you can always just get just email the client, email one, Julie or I, we'll get a message to the client. Let's get those fixed, just so that everything aligns better. If it's in the alley, it is already MSAG valid. Okay. If we change this to Highway 65 from North 65 Highway, we have to make a corresponding change in the MSAG as well, because the alley there won't be a record in the alley database unless it's MSAG valid. It falls out as an error and it never gets into the database. Okay, so don't think, just if you change the alley, there is a database change to make in the MSAG if it is a road name change of any sort or a community change. If it's a house number, probably not, but the MSAG it is. So we just flag those. If it's a name change, when you fix them, you just say make an MSAG change. I usually have the MSAG open as well. And before we give any of you one of these, and there are some of these stacked up to do, by the way, we will have I will have a one-on-one training session just to make sure you have it set up, and that, your everything else is working well. So this here, where it says 416 North Main Street, and says this is 416 in GIS, to be order to make this work, we have to actually change this database because the house number was wrong. It should have been 416. I don't know what it was. We have to then actually make the change in the alley database too, so it validates next time through. Again, I'll get a better document together for you on that. Here's one that says really messed up addressing here. Yeah, I'm like, what does this even mean? Can't locate. So 900 Main Street in DeWitt. DeWitt we had to resolve is at one letter, one word, 2 words too. So that was another issue there. The MSAG had one. There's Main Street. Was that Main Street?
Yeah.
416 North Main. It's not popping out at me.
No, that's not the one we did. It was really messed up.
900. It says
900.
900 Main Street.
Yeah, but where's Main? This is DeWitt.
Maybe
I mean,
that's
that's why
a
it's
There
not
it is, right
locatable.
here, right here. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So we
You
go
don't like to just do the-
512, 800, 804. This is really the only candidate for 900. Then we have 901 and 906 and 910 over here. So, you see what I'm saying? So it's really kind of difficult. I mean, to me, it's like this is really the only candidate, but it's squarely on the 800 block, right? There's nothing over here. This one, always look if there's landmarks, if they've done field work. It's a hydrant. This, he did not mark as a house, when he was out there. I don't know what the deal was with that. This is not the final remediated thing. I think I actually remember looking at the Google Street View and determining this was a house and could potentially be 900. it was like faced a really weird direction and he just somehow missed it when he was out there. But you know, you're doing some kind of, you know, sometimes it's kind of forensic stuff. There's a 0 right here, but that's not really a good candidate for 900 because it's on the odd side of the road and it's past 901. You know, so you know, really the only good candidates that would be in sequence are this one, and then if there's really something here. Sometimes you just can't resolve them and they have to go back to the client. Sometimes we haven't done field work in the cities, and so you don't have any landmark data that, you know, our field workers have dropped with their notes, like, hey, there's no house here anymore. So, you know, I always say when you can't resolve it, and what do you say, Ryan, a minute? 2 minutes?
I mean, I've spent way longer on this response. When it gets down to this, then you probably will need to spend more time.
Yeah. But on your first pass through, I mean, if you find yourself, you know, you're looking at multiple sources, you've looked at Street View, now you've got the US Post Office open and whatever else, you know, I think you just say, hey, refer to client and you move on. Okay. There's just so much research we can do without being out there and, you know, being in front of the client. So does anybody, like Gordon, how do you handle those things when you're trying to resolve those things? How much time would you spend on something before you're like,
To be
Yes.
honest, after many trials and tribulations, if I go to USPS and there's no address, I'm done.
okay.
I'm done, and
What-
it's either referred or I just say it's a bad address or
Yeah.
whatever. But I mean,
In the cases where you can't find a real location, in this case, we do not have parcels, so we can't match up names. When you have parcels, you could go back to this one, right?
right.
This 900 and say, well, who is it? You know, what is the name?
Yeah.
And it's
I do.
Carrie West, and you could look in the parcel and see if there was a West that lived there, and then you're like, aha, and it gets a lot better. But this is an extremely rural county with no relationship with the assessor, you know, so we don't
Mhm.
have it. And sometimes we get parcels with no last names in them either. Or you see something like it's a renter, and you see an et al, you know, you see it's a trust or something, you know, when you just can't figure out who it is. So,
Right. And I usually have my map set up with the parcels on with just the last name showing.
Yep,
for
that's a really
label,
good point.
so-
Yeah. So Bethany, Julie, you're likely to be doing these with a county that would have parcels. Coming up, we have Gasconade we have to get through. We have parcels for Gasconade. We have, let's see, Iron, I think I mean, they're all of them will have this. And so far, I've been doing the bulk of the work because it's kind of like, it's the only thing that the state requires the 100% on. They don't require it on the
Mhm.
MSAG, but for Alley, because it becomes a potential routing issue if we don't have a match, you got to get them in there. I want to find something and show you something else that frequently comes up in here. There's like funeral homes often have a whole bunch of phone numbers, and those are these telcos. Yeah, see these AT&Ts. Look at all these.
So
Okay.
this doesn't have this alley thing doesn't have any MSAG information at all in it.
No, because it is
Okay.
only going to be in the alley if it's already an MSEG match. So it's not going to, oh no, it actually might have the ESN in here. It does have the ESN. It has all the MSEG stuff in there, but it comes from the MSEG. They bump this against the MSEG to extract all the other, the ESN and the routing stuff. Yeah. So if you look at this, all these AT&T numbers, and they're all at 14 North Monroe Street. I think that's a good one to look at. I fixed it so that should be in the database.
Is this Carroll County?
Yeah. I know you spent a lot of time there, right? Working on the Carroll, yeah. So here's 14 North Monroe Street. Those were all in error before. And let's see when this point was added. It was added in May in the field. So that was probably a 0. He added that in the field. It probably wasn't, does it say resolve with Alley? Yeah, if it says resolve with Alley, it used to be a 0. So this was a 0 address.
That's their dispatch center.
No, their dispatch center's on the basement of the
Two
library.
North Monroe is their dispatch center.
Oh,
It's on
here, right
that's what it
here.
is.
Yeah, this one
It's
right
the
here.
basement of
Yeah.
the library right there. Two
Yeah, and
North
this is a
Monroe.
library up here,
Yeah.
and that's a dispatch. You're right. Look at that. You were just there. I
Yeah.
forgot about that. So whatever this building is here, it is the phone company's building. Okay. Sometimes that's actually looks like an office building. So and I'm going to find one to show you that looks like just a little spot on the map that wasn't addressed before. But this one wasn't posted. So this was a pretty obvious one to resolve. Oh, that's a 0. I can look, I can look on on Google Maps and see that it's a phone company or whatever, put the 14 on it, and then that immediately resolves up 22 errors, which is really nice when you can do a whole bunch of those at the same time. Let me go ahead and try to find like one of the smaller phone companies or the smaller communities, because it's pretty telling on, there you go. Oh, they also have these things, these E911 test lines, which are bogus addresses. Anything that says E911 test line, make it an exception. It's not a real address or location. It's like something they've added to the database just to test the system. Okay, let me think. It's Century, it's Sheraton Valley is the name of that little phone company. Look at all the hospital ones, courthouse, Here we go, Sheraton. Sheraton Valley Telephone Corporation.
Mhm.
A lot of different things. Here's one in Bosworth, 114 North Kansas Avenue.
Can you not just right click and pan to it?
No, because I don't have it. This is a table and I don't have the table associated. What is that called?
Okay.
Related, whatever, when you have a key field and
Yeah.
you have to, yeah.
Oh.
So that's why it's very annoying, but
Okay.
So this is another pretty deep, no, wait a
That's a
minute.
pain.
That's 114 North Kansas, I think. Yeah, so that's a good example here. See that little guy right there? That's what a lot of these phone company buildings look like. Now, I have seen a billion of these where this is 114 and there might be 4 or 5 numbers, and then they have a whole bunch of them with another number like 113. And you're like, there is no 113. It's just something they freaking made up. Okay. So you just, you'll see this with these little phone companies that they may have like a switch across the street or something that you cannot ever see. Nobody would ever think it needs an address, but it is a switch location of some sort that you're just going to have to put down. There's nothing here, no structure. Okay. We can make those exceptions. I mean, Ryan, you've dealt with this. Is it better to actually put a point on the map for this bogus location?
No. Why would you ever do that?
Well, I'm just
That would be against everything that we do and that like 911 is about.
Yeah, it would basically be introducing a point just to fix an error, but it's not a true location. So on those, you're just going to have to say there's nothing here. There's nothing that could potentially be 113, right? Especially if it's a phone company building. This is very likely a church or
It
something.
needs to be removed from the alley.
Yeah. So basically, it can't be removed from the alley, but it can be made an exception. So these are some more just like that one, the 224. The 224 Main Street is another example just like that. Oops, Main Street is not spelled like that. Yeah, another little guy like that. Okay. Just little building sitting there. You can't even tell from the front of it that it's a phone company building. They also look like outbuildings. And so, if you're trying to resolve something and it has a phone company in there, look for these kind of little buildings and then use Google Street View if you can, just to look at the front of the building and say, yeah, usually you can tell when you look at the front of the building. 224 West Main Street in, what is that town? Hale? Can you guys see my other map, my other screen now? My Google Maps, can you see that or not?
Yeah.
Okay. Was it Main Street? I have a very short memory here. It is. It's this little building right here. Okay. And you can, that's pretty much what they look like. Just little, solid little buildings that don't have a lot of that's cabinetry on the outside, circuitry. That's a telephone company building. So, and sometimes they're brick. But that's a good indicator that that's the building you're looking for. You don't see any windows usually on these buildings. It just has equipment and circuits and stuff in it, switches. Okay. But the thing is, they can have a lot of phone numbers related to them, and there can be a lot of errors on those, and they almost never have an address posted on them either. Okay. Okay, go back to, really, I think all of your investigative techniques will just rise to the surface, naturally. You have permission to add additional address points. You need to make sure you get the attribution added to them that is required for NextGen 911, those boundaries and things, the boundary data, because this is usually happening toward the end of a project, once we've remediated everything and we've got a good addressing base to work with. So you have permission to do that. You have permission to change the address in the data if you are sure or reasonably sure it needs to be changed. I mean, in the actual, your GIS is correct. Maybe highway is spelled out, and that's how it should be. Maybe they've got a couple of records that don't have highway spelled out, or one that has the wrong street type on it or something. You have permission to change it to match the GIS if the GIS is accurate. If you don't know, you have a lot of doubts about that, mark it to go back to the client, and we can talk to the client about it. Okay. You have permission to change a 0 address to a correct address. Okay. You have permission to change the GIS if the GIS is obviously wrong. Okay. Sometimes you'll see one where the guy in the field read it wrong and it says 307, it should be 301, and you've got a 301 in this database to resolve staring you in the face. You have permission to change the GIS to fix it. Okay, use logic. Look at the other addressing in the town. If it's pretty sound, it's more likely that our guy out in the field who's got the sun in his eyes and bushes in front of the house made the mistake reading the address off the house. Okay. Okay, let's go just to see any questions. Julie, how about starting with you?
No questions, but can we show how to use the address lookup on USPS?
Absolutely. So let's do the, let me see, why isn't that jumping up? Here we go. So USPS.gov, really basic, USPS.com, quick tools, look up a zip code, okay? I know that doesn't make sense, but you're going to then pick find by address. Live here. I've obviously used this tool before. I'm going to just take out a couple things. Okay, so I put my address into 7023 Wedgwood. You need the city or the zip code. If you have the city, you need to have the state. If you don't need either one of those, if you have the zip code, it's not probably auto-filling zip code from that, the state from that zip code. You hit find. So it says, hey, you entered this, but this is the real address, and it gives my zip +4. Okay. So if you don't validate it here, if you put something in and you've entered the wrong community, for example, it may not match because you think it's Cedar Hill, but it's really House Springs. It might be somewhere between them, and you just have the zip code wrong. So be prepared to enter a community name from a surrounding zip code, surrounding community, postal community name. If we look at some of these,
I will tell you for a little to save people time, edit and search again.
Yes. Instead of
backing out.
It saves it all.
Yes.
And you just change the address.
I learned that because if you just hit start over again, you got to put everything else in again.
Yes.
So that's really helpful too. But it's really easy to get to. USPS.com is the public facing arm of USPS.gov, which is the USPS's zip code, internal system. And if it's here, if it's not here, sometimes it just returns, like if I just put in, let me try the 8,000. There aren't any, I don't think. So the information wasn't found. Now, I'm 7023. There's not a 7025. I know that, okay? Because I've lived here for too long. Okay. So what's it going to do? It's going to, it actually validates it as a real address, and that's not a real address, Gordon.
Huh.
But
But
it
it's 'cause of
validates
the-
it because it hit
it's
the
the
range on
range.
the road. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, it hit the range.
As you
Oh,
notice, look what's missing on the end. The zip plus the
zip
zip
4.
plus 4 is missing.
yeah.
So that's a good indication. If you do not see, that means it hit the range of the road, but it is not validating the actual structure number enough to give it a zip plus 4. So again, that's something to look for too, if that zip plus 4 doesn't pop up. It also indicates there could be just like a mail, it could be a valid address delivery at that location. However, on my block, I think every single house has a mailbox. So, we're out in the boonies. So anyway, bookmark that if you haven't used that before. It is a pretty, a good site to use, just to see what's, just to get additional validation for addressing. The piece that I just showed you is really, really one of the more detailed, annoying things that we have to do, because what falls out is usually things that are difficult to begin with. Schools. Didn't we see a whole bunch of those schools in here? Places that have might have multiple addresses, Was it Carrollton Schools? There's the Carroll County Hospital, Carroll County Courthouse. I'm going to see if all of these hospitals are the same address. I'm going to guess that they're not, even though they're all the Carroll County Hospital. Might be. Yeah, they're all using 1502 North Jefferson. But a lot of times hospitals have multiple buildings and multiple addresses on them, and they get kind of sticky. That's actually all the same, believe it or not. Courthouse. I thought there was like Carrollton Schools I saw in here. Carroll House. City of, those are always, here's the high school. There's the elementary. This might actually be addressed correctly. What is it? Yeah. So this is the superintendent's office right here. It's a little different. But, you're going to see sometimes you'll get to a complex that is a high school, a grade school, a middle school, a rec building, and there's one address on it. And maybe in the phone database, there are 3 different addresses. And if you found that, and it was like 101 and 105 and 109, you could actually put those additional points out if you could identify where each of those buildings are. And if not, it goes back to the client for some better, detail, so we know which ones are which. So it's really difficult sometimes to do those downtown buildings. I can find Carrollton again. The ones that are all connected to each other, I know you've all done those. Carrollton is way down here, isn't it? Where is it? There it is. I'm not going to be able to find it by looking for it, am I? The one, where the courthouse square was and all that. But, sometimes they're like these buildings that are all, it's the main street on, Main Street where the business district's done in here. Like here, right? So if you look at those zeros, we have 3 doors placed before number 5. So what do you do there? Is it 1A, 1B, 1A, 1B, and 3? It's difficult. Also, these areas are the least reliable when you look at the business names, because they change a lot. And sometimes the person will change the name of the business and keep the same phone number. So do look out for that. I mean, there's not a lot of training I can give you on that, but you might say it says, Heather's Tan and Spa, on the Jasper has put that he's collected from what's posted on the building, but it might be a totally different name that's still kind of health and spa related in the database. So, and gas stations too. Gas stations might be the Fast Break, but it might be Robert's Oil in the phone book, or in this record, because that's the parent company. So don't rule it out just because the name is a little different on a business. Okay. Do we need to go over the setup and the technique again, or is it something that you can kind of figure out, with I load as little data as possible. I just load the address point, center line, cities, and the alley. That's basically it. Landmarks if we have them. Label everything like Gordon said. If you have parcels, load the parcels. Label the last name, the owner
Well,
name or the last
and then-
name. Yeah.
Sometimes actually what I'll do is I'll actually put the structure number out there. Because then if the two match, then I'm pretty sure that that's an address that's
Right.
validated.
Right. It's in the parcel data and in
It-
the address point data.
Right,
Sure.
Right.
But once you load the data, you're looking for this address compare. This is it's going to be a table. And if you want to know how to relate it so that you can actually click to go to those locations, remember, clicking to go may not take you there because those aren't valid addresses. A lot of them aren't. The ones you're looking for aren't in the data to begin with. It may actually geocode to the center line, though, if you just try to use the address tool to geocode it, like, is a 520 Waterfront Street going to, validate in this county? There. Have you ever used it? Anybody uses this tool, but there's not even a waterfront in here. Oh, it's Waterworks. There it is. Waterworks Street. And geocode that baby, and there it is. It actually is a valid address here, but this would just geocode it on the center line, even if there was no address point there. That may get you closer to the location. So, do you guys all know how to use that tool?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
The geocoder, yeah. Bethany,
Yes.
have you used that one?
No, but I saw you do it.
Okay.
So I think
You
It's
have
pretty
to fill-
simple.
Yeah, and you have to fill in all the you can't just do like Waterworks. You have to put Waterworks Street if that's what it is. You need to fill in all the different pieces of that's the only
Okay.
annoying point, but it does get you close, which is nice, when you don't know where you're going with those things. So, and then just sort, like I said, I pulled the address in the community and the address compare field together. Blunt's just renamed that old for me when he ran it again. And then I code directly into it whether I've resolved it. I'm not looking at the matches. The matches are good. I'm looking at the no matches and coding what's going on. This 710 Harvest Hills was a big mess. I remember that area. Remember that, Ryan? I had the 800s and the 100s on the same block, I think. So here's a case like with this business highway. To me, that looks like it could have been a formatting issue. Business Highway 24E. It could have been like, we could have had business HWY. I mean, there could have been a lot of different things that would have prevented those things from syncing up, in the database. So, but Julie, I think it would be, and Ryan, because you'd be involved in this too, I think it would be really good training to give, I would start with Gordon because I'm going to give Bethany those last two chapters from Jasper and Elliot to do.
Mm-hmm.
We trained on yesterday, but to get one queued up for Gordon to do. And I know Gasconade is there and it doesn't have as many errors as I would have thought it would have had at all. So
Okay.
maybe getting him working on Gasconade, I've got that data.
Yeah.
Unless you would prefer Gordon working with St. Francis County with Kathleen.
He's ready for that.
It's not hard stuff. It's just,
It's annoying when they don't tell
Yes.
you. They take
Yes.
up their whole system apart and forget about the mapping. You know what they told me? It's like, well, your stuff always works, so we forget about you. I'm like, yeah, right.
well,
You just know I'm not going to.
I
Just
told
go-
you that on the first week I worked for you guys. It's nice to have them come from Cerner where everything didn't work. It comes over to everything just freaking works, man.
That's good to know. It really is. So, Ryan,
But Cerner's a whole different thing, though.
it is. It
it's
is
a
very
much bigger.
different- yeah.
It's a giant monster.
Yes,
So.
we have little pieces and not giant
Yes.
monsters. Ryan, does this help at all? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, my I think our philosophy has always been and should be that we use the data that we see.
Okay.
That's our philosophy behind field data collection.
Yeah.
I do not think we should be bending over backward too much to make our data fit a spreadsheet,
In most cases, it's because
which
we
is
have
often wrong, out of date, was never
Okay.
right in the first place, you know.
90% of what we find on these alley spreadsheets falls into very predictable categories.
Yeah,
These
I agree.
telephone company buildings and circuits that are not even addressed usually. Okay. They're not obvious on the ground what they are all the time. So there's a lot of that. Multiple addresses for one location, like these big complexes, schools, hospitals, things like that, big businesses, you'll see that too. Where there are 4 or 5 buildings out there, there's one address on it, one address point, but the database has 2 or 3 or 4 addresses, and you know you look at them like those are valid, but where do they go? You know, that's they're not obvious from the outside looking in when we've done this field work. Street name disconnects, like AV versus AVE. By the time we fixed them with the address points and the center lines, but we haven't bumped them against the MSAG yet. And that causes a lot of fallout. So they're really kind of predictable places where this happens. No, we should not try to accommodate their bad
Yeah,
address
like definitely
in the alley.
don't go adding address points that aren't there.
Yes, that's a good point. There's nothing there, don't add the address point. Like I
Yeah.
could have added a whole bunch of address points for buildings that have been knocked down, and I can show you, go back and show you tons of these. I'll be going through, oh yeah, there I can see the foundation. That still has an address. It's between 101 and 105, and I'm looking for 103, and there used to be something there. There's a sidewalk going up to a lot, right? But it would be stupid to put the house point there because there's nothing there. You know, and when she called them, they found out they were disconnects. She was just startled that there were that many disconnects in their database. They should have been cleaned out by that phone company as they're disconnected, as people, change
Yeah.
service. But the service
That's
order,
just, it's just an inherent flaw with
Yeah.
the system.
yeah, and it happens mostly with the small phone companies. I didn't find any AT&T disconnects, just Sheraton Valley
Oh,
disconnects.
interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Mhm. Their system is just is better, to weed those things out. So. Okay. As little data as possible. Don't overload your map with data. Don't work so long on one record that you're pulling your hair out. Just mark it for the client. Use predictable codes. Fixed if you fixed it. You don't have to say how you fixed it. If it would help you for the next time through when we run it, put it in there. Fixed, added point, add a new point, fixed, change whatever. If you can't resolve it, just say you can't resolve it. Those go back to the clients. So Julie, let's also try to line up one, just a small one for Bethany to work on after she finishes the other, because I want you to have something to start working on soon before we are too deep into before you're too deep into other things. And then we'll know how it's going.
Mhm.
So I like doing this kind of, I call it forensic stuff, but I just don't have a lot of time to do too many. So, oh, the other thing, and I think Ryan will tell you this, when you're working on this, a lot of times we're getting these at the very end of the remediation projects, and the data is in really good shape with topology and other, and so
then we start
very
to add stuff and then it makes it
So-
worse. Yeah.
Please try to add all the fields for any address points you add, and make sure that if you have any boundaries on, I would discourage you from loading the boundaries to begin with, except for city limits,
Yeah.
but do not make sure they're not
Make
selectable.
sure they're
so
all
you're
off
not
selectable.
shifting anything. Yeah. It's very easy to shift boundaries. We've all done it. Gordon's like,
Oh,
I've
yeah.
done that ever. Right. But do take care of the data in that way. Because it's inevitable when I do this, and I'm always introducing an error that Ryan didn't have before. And we want to try to avoid that as much as possible. And we have hit the 2 p.m. mark at the, for our, I probably only had half an hour for this, but we've taken an hour. Is there anything else that anybody has? Because we have a Stone County call, right, Julie?
At
Right now.
2:30, yeah.
2:30. Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
Oh, thank-
Okay, I'm gonna have Glenn send Gordon